Is the Miami Heat's window to win an NBA championship with Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, and the crew closed? That is the topic of today's show. I am Nic Rohloff. This is the Heat Report by Chat Sports. But the reason why I am even talking about this is because a really prominent NBA media talking head kind of believes it is. That is Jason Timpf, who hosts the Hoops Tonight show, is also with The Volume. He said it felt like Jimmy and Bam were on an awesome championship foundation. All these opportunities over years where Miami could have pounced on somebody in 22 to 24 to capitalize, but now it may be too late. And I have some thoughts on this quote potentially closing the door for the Heat to win an NBA championship with Jimmy Butler. But first, make sure you are subscribed because we only have 3 or 4 days left in the month of August, and we trail our sub battle with the Bulls Report by about 42. So hit that sub button. Daily content here at the channel and everything starting the Miami Heat, but I hate losing more than anything else, so hit that sub button. Well, let's take a look at what the Heat have done ever since Jimmy Butler joined the Miami Heat organization in 2019 offseason. In his first year, they lost in the NBA Finals during the bubble year to the Los Angeles Lakers, then came back and lost in the first round. It was a disgusting sweep against the Milwaukee Bucks. Don't even want to bring it up. Shout out Bryn Forbes. Nope, don't shout him out. F Bryn Forbes. Next year, they got to the Eastern Conference Finals, were a shot away from going to the finals to take on the Golden State Warriors, which I'll go to my grave saying, by the way, Miami packs up the Warriors very easily. We matched up with them so perfectly with our defensive presence, our ability to close. Jimmy was on a different level that playoff run. Bam was fantastic. I really do believe we would have beat the Golden State Warriors. So Jimmy missing that three-point shot with about 18 seconds left really breaks my heart in Game 7, but ultimately lost there. Then make it to the NBA Finals the next year, but loses in 5 games to the Denver Nuggets, that miracle 8-seed run. And then just last season, played with injuries, very up and down season, lost in 5 games in the first round to the eventual champions Boston Celtics. And ironically enough, when you actually look at the last 5 years of the Miami Heat, 4 out of the 5 years they lost to the NBA champion. The 1 year they didn't lose to the NBA champion, they lost to the NBA champion runner-up. But either way, the Heat have been so close to winning NBA title, but so far away. Like, it feels like they are always amongst the top 4 teams remaining, right there on the precipice of winning a championship. But then when you think about it and how the 2 NBA Finals series have went, it really hasn't felt like they've even had a chance to win those series. Now, the one against the Lakers was riddled with injuries. Bam missed a couple games. Goran Dragic missed a couple games, and those two were playing at such an elite level, it had sucked. But the one in 2023, when they lost to the Denver Nuggets, like, it was evident, very much so, that they had no chance of beating the Denver Nuggets. And that is kind of why, like, they've always been searching for this missing piece to complete the roster, to add to Jimmy and Bam, to be that leading guy potentially in some big moments, to take over the scoring prowess in the regular season. Like, you've seen him go after Damian Lillard last offseason, Donovan Mitchell 2 offseasons ago in 2022, but also hoping that he was not going to sign a long-term extension this offseason. They've done the rope-a-dope dance with Kevin Durant a couple times. In that same 2022 offseason when Donovan Mitchell and KD both ultimately got traded, Mitchell going to Cleveland from Utah, and then that was also the year KD requested a trade from Phoenix, or from Brooklyn, mentioned Phoenix and Miami as his 2 preferred destinations, then ultimately got dealt at the deadline. But either way, they have danced around these 3 high-profile players for quite a while. And if I'm going to be honest here, folks, I'm still haunted by Dame, man. I really was convinced he was a Heat basketball player. When he comes out and he requests a trade, and he didn't even say a list of teams that he wanted to go to. No, he requested specifically to join the Miami Heat, to play with his good friend Bam Adebayo. Like, sure, did Dame have the best season last year? No, and I'm going to admit that's the case. But I think it had to do with a lot of him not wanting to be in Milwaukee, not liking that area. There's also went some personal issues with his divorce as well, and that really affected his game as well, in my opinion. It would not have been that way in Miami, and we have constantly said that the Heat need someone in the backcourt to help facilitate for Jimmy and Bam, but also alleviate pressure off their shoulders on the offensive end and allow them to be their dominant selves on the defensive end. Dame would have demanded that defense from opposing teams, which would have allowed Jimmy and Bam to go more one-on-one and have less coverage on them, which would have only elevated elevated their game. Like, the trio of Dame, Jimmy, and Bam would have been so good. I said this. I even went on there and said a hot take that Jimmy, Bam, and Dame fit better right from the jump than D-Wade, LeBron, and Bosh did, just because there's better spacing and there's better fluidity on the offensive end and defensive end. But ultimately, it's a big what-if situation because it never happened. And that could have been the end of the Miami Heat's championship run with Jimmy and Bam, because we saw last year it did not go so well. I have more thoughts on the matter, but before I give you them, I want to hear your thoughts. Be honest with me. Is the Heat's championship window closed? Type Y for yes or type N for no. This is your chance to be an optimist, your chance to also be a pessimist. Let me know in the comment section. I'll say this. I'm going to be optimistic here. I don't think it's closed with Jimmy and Bam, but it has become incredibly difficult and a lot more challenging to potentially win an NBA Finals now than it was over the last 4 or 5 seasons when Miami was consistently making deep playoff pushes. You just look at the Eastern Conference. The Boston Celtics are as good as they have been since Jimmy joined Miami. The New York Knicks have really come onto the scene, and they've got a roster that, as much as I hate the Knicks and like to make fun of them, like, you can't play with them, man. Brunson, OG, McCall, Julius Randle. You also have Josh Hart and Dante DiVincenzo. I don't know why I was spacing on those names. Long night last night, I guess. But they've been really good. Sixers, adding Paul George, adding some other key pieces around them, like Kelly Oubre coming back, Andre Drummond, Kyle Lowry returning. Like, these 3 teams are going to be so good. These 3 are elite rosters, man. Top to bottom. They got an elite starting 5. They got an elite top-end bench unit as well. These 3 are likely going to be your top 3 teams in the East all year long unless a massive injury occurs to Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, Jalen Brunson. That is really going to be the case here. And even the scary part is, folks, it is even if you get through the East, you still got to worry about the Western Conference, man. The best player in the world, Nikola Jokic, still plays over there. The rising Oklahoma City Thunder, who are actually my NBA Finals pick for this upcoming year, after they added Hartenstein and Caruso, I think that roster is just absolutely loaded, and you get big jumps from Chet and Jalen Williams. I could go on about the Thunder for a while here, put on my broad NBA cap. But then the Timberwolves as well. The Mavericks are also returning. Like, these teams are really good. And to think Miami is even in the top 10 of the NBA teams right now with their current roster just isn't that case. The only possible way that Miami can even compete with those teams I just mentioned, the top 4 in the West, the top 3 in the East, is if they stay healthy and they either make a move or get unbelievable development this year from Nikola Jovic and Jaime Jaquez Jr. There is no in between. You either have to go make a sizable trade or you have to have these 2 young guys really explode onto the scene. And they were terrific last year. Jaquez, as a rookie, 18th overall pick, giving you 12 points per game on his efficiency from the field as well as his smarts and defense. It was terrific. You can't deny that. Nikola Jovic in year 2 was also really good, and I expect a really good year 3 for the big man from Serbia. But if you are not going to make a trade, which it seems very unlikely that they will do that, at least right now, trade deadline, maybe a different story. But at least going into the season, you're likely seeing the roster that you have on paper right now. So if you want to get off to a hot start and be atop of the Eastern Conference, you have to stay healthy, number 1, but you also have to see massive jumps from these 2, which we're going to talk more about here in just a second. But make sure you are getting your Miami Heat gear right now. $20 Miami Heat t-shirt. You're not going to find a better deal out there, folks. Chatsports.com/Heat shirt. That link is in the description and comments of today's video. Make sure you represent the Heat off the court, and when the season comes around in a couple months, you have your gear ready to go for tip-off. When you talk about the jumps potentially being needed from Jaime Jaquez Jr. and Nikola Jovic, I think Triple J has to become a 6th Man of the Year candidate, which I think is very likely that he takes on that role, but also plays at a good enough level for that, but also an all-star level. And would he make the all-star team? Probably not. But can you give me 15 points, 5 boards, 3 assists, while shooting 50% from the field? That would only be a 1.2% increase from his rookie season, but a better jump in the three-point department, shooting about 36-37% compared to 32% last season. If he does that, well, that does improve the Heat team because it adds more threats and more layers to their offense, as well as keeping a really solid defender and a smart basketball player. And specifically with Nikola Jovic, I think after averaging 7, 4, and 2 last year, Expecting a jump to 10, 7, and 4, points, rebounds, assists, that is, I think is realistic. 6'11", really smart player, high IQ, can play make, 40% three-point shooter. If he becomes more aggressive, works better on his defensive ability as well, so he can play later in basketball games. This is someone that can absolutely make that jump to 10, 7, and 4. And like I said, they both played really well last year. Gave us Heat fans hope for the future of these two being building blocks alongside Bam Adebayo. But if the Heat want to win a championship in this window with Jimmy Butler and Adebayo, these two need to step up right now. Or you can go with the other option I mentioned and make a blockbuster trade. Now, there's 3 targets that I could see ending up coming available during the trade deadline. Kawhi Leonard, Trae Young, and Brandon Ingram. We know Brandon Ingram's going to be available because he's been available via trade for the past 3 months. It just hasn't gone through yet as him and New Orleans continue to have their differences on contract disputes. Trae Young did not get dealt. They traded DeJounte Murray. I think Trae, if they stink again this year, which is highly likely, Landry Fields in that front office could just ultimately blow it up and say, F it, we're getting rid of Trae Young at the deadline. We're moving forward with other players and see what we can get back in return. But then Kawhi Leonard. That's the intriguing name. And I think any one of these 3 guys could change things for the Miami Heat. It would add more defense, at least with Brandon Ingram and Kawhi Leonard on the wings. It add more depth in that front court, allows them to have more isolation scoring as well, to become a more efficient offensive team, which has held this team back at times in the biggest moments because it's only Jimmy and Bam who can really do the big moment things for this Heat offense. But I want to talk specifically about Kawhi Leonard here in just a second. But let me know during this year, doesn't have to be right now, could be going into the NBA trade deadline. Who is your top Miami Heat trade target? Obviously, if you were to go in unicorn land, I would choose Anthony Edwards, but that's not going to happen this year. Maybe down the line, but at least for this year, drop a name. My top one is Kawhi Leonard. And I actually think he could become available. And I know some of you might think it's crazy to think the Clippers might trade Kawhi, but think about the West, man. The conference is absolutely loaded. And after they lost Paul George, I don't like the moves they made for the most part in this offseason. And if they get off to a rough start, and one of Kawhi or James Harden misses time, I think it's very likely the Clippers finish outside the top 10 of the Western Conference standings. All it takes is one of those top 2 guys, Harden or Kawhi, to go down for 20 games. And it could get really rough to begin the season. And if they're struggling out of the gates here, and they're looking in late January as like 11 seed, why wouldn't they trade Leonard at the deadline? Because his stock is never going to get higher. It is going to be tough to justify trading for Kawhi because it's going to cost you a lot, and he's someone who has had injury history quite a bit, doesn't play, a lot of injury management, load management, and not playing in the postseason. But when he's on the floor, he is as good as it gets from the three-point land, defensively, in the mid-range. He is an assassin that could work extremely well with Jimmy Butler and Bam forming one of the most elite front court defensive trios in the NBA. And here's my thing. I've long said this, and I know a lot of people here might just say get rid of Jimmy. I don't understand that. I want to see Jimmy Butler get a ring for all he's done for this Heat team. I know a lot of people don't like the regular season days that he takes off, but these playoff performances and moments from him have been so damn good that I want to pay it off. Can you go out and get a third guy to help Jimmy and Bam potentially take down New York, Philly, or Boston in the Eastern Conference? If Kawhi becomes available, my oh my, I think I'd pick up the phone and make it happen to try to get Jimmy and Bam a ring. All right, make sure you are subscribed to the channel because we're talking Heat basketball on a daily basis. We'll have you covered between news, rumors, trade talk, segments. We got it all here at the channel. We have videos every day as well, so subscribe, and I'll see you tomorrow.